You know, as we sit here today, it was 1 year ago today, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You said in Warsaw that Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia. So how does this war end, and what does a victory look like?
Well, that depends on what the Ukrainians decide. But here's what we have to do in the meantime. We have to put the Ukrainians in a position where they can make advances this spring and summer and move to a place where they can negotiate from a position of strength. But you know, that expression, you've heard me use it before and others, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. We're not going to dictate to them what the end result is.
When you talk about them negotiating, does that mean they get to keep Crimea and parts of the east?
That means they decide that. The Ukrainians decide that. But I could picture a circumstance where there's a transition to that. It's not all one time. Look, a year ago today, there are only 70 kilometers from the border where the Russians expected they'd come rolling down into Kyiv and own it all. They got pushed back. It didn't happen. And I think they underestimated a great deal, the Russians did.
You announced another $2.5 billion in aid to Ukraine today, $113 billion now. We know the vast majority of Americans support Ukraine, but there are now many who are asking, how long can we spend like this?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure how many are asking. I know the mega crowd is. The right-wing Republicans are, talking about we can't do this. You find ourselves in a situation where the cost of walking away could be considerably higher than the cost of helping Ukraine maintain its independence.
We know the Germans are now sending tanks in after the U.S. said it would send Abrams tanks as well. But we know President Zelensky continues to say what he really needs are F-16s. Will you send F-16s?
Look, we're sending him what our seasoned military thinks he needs now. He needs tanks, he needs artillery, he needs air defense, including another HIMARS. There's things he needs now that we're sending him to put him in a position to be able to make gains this spring and this summer going into the fall.
You don't think he needs F-16s now?
No, he doesn't need F-16s now.
Is that a never?
Look, first of all, the idea that we know exactly what's going to be needed a year, 2, 3 from now, but there is no basis upon which there is a rationale, according to our military now, to provide F-16s.
But you're not ruling it out?
I am ruling it out for now.
For now. Vladimir Putin told the Russian people this week that China's President Xi is coming to Russia, likely as early as this spring. I know the State Department and the Pentagon now have both warned China not to offer lethal military assistance to Russia in this war with Ukraine, saying the U.S. is concerned that China is considering providing lethal support to Russia. Would that cross a line for you?
Look, it's not in China's. I had a very frank conversation with President Xi this past summer on this issue. And I pointed out to him, the conversation went like this. I said, Mr. President, this is not a threat. It's just an assertion, a statement of what I think the reality is. You saw what happened when the rest of the world, Europe in particular, saw the brutality of what Putin was doing in Ukraine to the Ukrainians from Russia. And I said, without any government prodding, 600 American corporations left Russia, from McDonald's to Exxon to across the board. And I said, and if you are engaged in the same kind of brutality by supporting the brutality that's going on, I said, you may face the same consequence. I don't anticipate, we haven't seen it yet, but I don't anticipate a major initiative on the part of China providing weaponry to Russia.
But if they did, would that be crossing a line for you, Mr. President?
It would be the same line everyone else would have crossed. In other words, we impose severe sanctions on anyone who has done that.
So there would be serious consequences?
I'll let you characterize what they would be. We would respond.
I ask you all of this because there's a new report in the German newspaper Der Spiegel that the Russian military could be negotiating right now with a Chinese drone manufacturer to produce kamikaze drones for Russia. Are you aware of this? Is U.S. intelligence tracking this?
U.S. intelligence is aware of everything that's going on in this area, but I'm not going to confirm specifically what U.S. intelligence has found out or not found out.
What do you make of this Chinese peace plan floated overnight that Putin is now applauding today?
I think you answered the question. Putin's applauding it. So how could it be any good? I'm not being facetious. I'm being deadly earnest. I've seen nothing in the plan that would indicate that there is something that would be beneficial to anyone other than Russia if the Chinese plan were followed. And so the idea that China is going to be negotiating the outcome of a war that's a totally unjust war for Ukraine is just not rational.
Let me ask about U.S.-China relations in general, already strained after the Chinese spy balloon over the U.S. Let me just ask you this first. Do we know definitively yet whether or not that spy balloon was flying over the continental U.S. intentionally?
It is almost not relevant once it was over the United States.
So there's a possibility President Xi didn't know?
There is a possibility of that.
Were they surveilling the U.S. or attempting to?
That's what that balloon does, surveillance.
Let me ask you, when the balloon was shot down off South Carolina, the defense secretary placed a call to his Chinese counterpart on a line that's supposed to always be open. The Chinese did not take the call. They didn't pick up the phone. Does that trouble you?
Yes. There should be a direct open line of communications, particularly for two most powerful nations in the world, to be able to resolve anything quickly so there's not a mistake made.
The defense secretary says they still haven't had that call. How does your administration fix this?
We make it clear that it's necessary for that to occur. We can't fix it.
I want to ask you about a couple of issues here at home. It's been 3 weeks now since the toxic train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, as you know. The mayor says he saw you in Ukraine, and he says it tells you he doesn't care about us. They're asking, is the president coming to Ohio? Do you have any plan to travel to Ohio, and have you talked with the mayor yet?
Let's put this in perspective. Within 2 hours of that derailment, the EPA was in there. Within 2 hours. Every major agency in the United States government that had anything to do with rail and or cleanup was there and is there. In addition to that, I've spoken at length to the congresspersons, the governors, the senators from both states of Pennsylvania and in Ohio. And I've made it clear to them anything they need is available. We'll make it available to them. Whatever happens here, we got to understand it's the responsibility of the railroad company, who's made, by the way, tens of billions of dollars in profits. Tens of billions of dollars of profits lately.
So do you plan to travel there, and have you talked with the mayor?
I can't recall whether I don't think I've talked to the mayor. I've talked to everyone else there, and multiple times. Talked to both the senators, both governors. I've talked to everyone there is to talk to. And we made it clear that everything is available.
Let me ask you the question everyone is asking. Are you running?
Well, apparently someone interviewed my wife today, I heard.
I heard that too, just before I came in.
I got to call her and find out. No, all kidding aside. My intention hasn't been from the beginning to run, but there's too many other things I have to finish in the near term before I start a campaign.
Well, let me ask you, you brought up your wife, the First Lady, Jill Biden, obviously, traveling in Kenya. She was asked just today, is all that's left at this point simply setting a time and a place for the announcement? And she said, pretty much. Do you agree with your wife's assessment?
I would say God love her. Look, I meant what I said. I've got other things to finish before I get into a full-blown campaign.
Let me ask you about a conversation that people are having at home. Both your supporters and your critics. They know that if you're reelected, you would be 82 when you're sworn in. You would be 86 at the end of your term. Is your age part of your own calculation into whether to run again?
No, but it's legitimate for people to raise issues about my age. It's totally legitimate to do that. And the only thing I can say is watch me.
Let me ask you one of the immediate questions. If and when you do announce that you're running again, you and the former president are both now under investigation by the Justice Department for the discovery of these classified documents. I know that you believe these two cases are very different, but I do remember something you said after the discovery at Mar-a-Lago. You said, I thought data that was in there may compromise sources and methods and names of people who help, and it's just totally irresponsible. Can you assure the American people that none of the documents discovered in your garage or at your old office compromised sources or methods or U.S. intelligence?
I've been advised by the counsel, let the Justice Department make that decision, to not try to alter the case in any way. There have been very few documents that have been confiscated, found in my possession that were in my possession, meaning in my home. All the stuff that was moved out of my Senate office over the years, I'm told there were a couple things that were from 1973 or 74. Documents were marked classified. I don't know of anything, and maybe I don't know of anything that is marked like it was, top secret, highly, et cetera. But I'm told not to comment on that because I don't even know what they are able to, what they confiscated.
There are many who will understand why you can't comment, why your lawyers are saying not to comment. They also saw you, though, comment on former President Trump. And so at the very least...
Because, look, here's what they were showing. You guys were showing on television things lying on the ground that said top secret, national, code word. And the difference is every single solitary thing I've been asked to do, I've done voluntarily. I've invited the Justice Department to come into every aspect of any place that I had any control of. There was no need for search warrants, or no need. Well, what do you need? Just come. Whatever you want. Whatever you want, wherever you want to go, you can go. That was totally different.
But that one word you used, when you hear about boxes in your garage or in your old office, you called the Trump discovery irresponsible. Is there something irresponsible here, though, too?
You're a good lawyer, but you're trying to make a comparison. There's degrees of irresponsibility they can be significant degrees of responsibility. The way in which the boxes were packed up from my office, apparently not everything was gone through as meticulously as it should have, but there was no intention. I opened up my home, all my homes. The home at the beach and the home my permanent home. And they spent hours and hours going through everything, personal, everything I had. And that's a fundamentally different thing. There's nothing for me to hide.
I want to ask about the economy. You talk often about how the rate of inflation has begun to slow. Unemployment now at its lowest level in 50 years. But you've also seen the polls. Our latest ABC News poll shows 4 in 10 Americans say they're worse off than when you were elected. Only 16% said they were better off. So why is that? Why aren't Americans feeling this?
Well, look, I think it goes well beyond the economy. Think about it. You make the news. You interview for the news. Can you think of anything they turn on the television and go, God, that makes me feel good? Almost anything. Everything is in the negative. We're also finding out now that one of the outlets has decided that they even put things on they know to be false in order to increase their ratings. So I think things are a little out of whack, and I don't blame people for being down. When you had 2 years of the pandemic, kids out of school, the mental health problems in the country are seriously increased, especially among young people. Some things are, for example, even if they're feeling down about employment, they've got better jobs. They're making more money. Inflation is still higher than it should be. And, everything from gasoline prices to a war going on in Ukraine. So I can't think of a time when there's been greater uncertainty, notwithstanding the fact we created an 800,000 manufacturing jobs. We're better off than virtually any other major nation in the world economically. But it's understandable why people are just down.
I know this is a defining moment in this war. We watched your speech here in Warsaw. And as you know, just hours before, Vladimir Putin gave his own speech. And I wanted to ask you about something Vladimir Putin said. He said that Russia is suspending cooperation in the nuclear treaty with the United States. What's your message to Putin on that?
It's a big mistake to do that, not very responsible. But I don't read into that he's thinking of using nuclear weapons or anything like that. I think I'm not sure what else he was able to say in his speech at the moment. But I think it's a mistake. And I'm confident we'll be able to work it out.
He is saying he's going to suspend participation in this nuclear treaty. Rhetoric is one thing, but we're a year into this war now. Does it concern you when he says something like this, and are we less safe?
Well, look, I think we're less safe when we walk away from arms control agreements that are very much in both parties' interest and the world's interest. But I've not seen anything, we've not seen anything where there's a change in his posture, what they're doing. The idea that somehow this means they're thinking of using nuclear weapons, international continental ballistic missiles, there's no evidence of that.
The world watched this surprise visit to Kyiv. How risky was it for a sitting president of the United States to go into Kyiv?
I didn't think it was that risky.
You like a train.
Not 20 hours worth of.
Yeah. With those air sirens, those air raid sirens overhead in Kyiv, how important was it that the world saw you standing next to President Zelensky?
Well, look, I think that's I'm not being facetious. Folks like you decide how important that is. It was important to me to stand with Zelensky and let the world know on the year anniversary, we're not walking away from Ukraine.